I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
So it's funny, sports dad Judd Zulgad, you've seen many Timberwolves drafts in your lifetime?
Yes,
Some-
I have.
some
Going back to
better
the first
than-
one. Pooh Richardson.
Pooh Richardson.
Still
Let's
remember
go.
that night.
Pooh Richardson. He was like my favorite player as a kid before KG and
Right.
Stephon Marbury in that era.
Yeah, he was not at that time we thought to ourselves, hey, this is a good start. UCLA guy,
Yeah.
good draft pick.
He's a good player.
There was excitement. There was plenty of
player.
excitement.
Chanting Pooh inside Target Center. I feel like the last 2 or 3 weeks on this show here, Flagrant Howls, Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, we've had these discussions about how do you get a secondary initiator, just like a microwave scoring option next to Anthony Edwards. Would you have to trade Karl-Anthony Towns? So you'd be trading your second best scorer and one of the best 3-point shooters. Like, what kind of a sacrifice is that? And I had kind of floated a couple times, just these are sort of Hail Mary takes, but is there some way that you could keep Karl-Anthony Towns as your unicorn 7-footer and find somebody, even with like the second apron luxury tax restrictions, everything? Is there a way to find a secondary scorer without giving up Karl-Anthony Towns? And then we would kind of just move quickly past that because, how would you do that with the 27th pick and no cap space? So to get a second initiator of offense, a microwave scorer, option one is, you could trade Cat, and we even had the Cat for KD discussions. Like, would you ever consider trading Cat for Kevin Durant, 35 years old? Mm-hmm. Okay, does that make your team better? You could pray for someone internally. Can Jaden McDaniels, as we've talked about, go from being like a 10 to 12 points a game guy, maybe becomes a 17, 18-point scorer like a diet Kawhi Leonard? Or option 3, which we didn't even know was an option, Tim Connelly could trade basically a 12-year-old. He trades a 2030 draft pick to move up almost 20 spots to get Rob Dillingham, star freshman guard from Kentucky. And then they take 23-year-old Terrence Shannon Jr. with the 27th. So they basically said, let's go find the 2 best microwave scorers in the first round, or like 2 of the 3 or 4 best. Yep. And just put them on this team, keep Karl-Anthony Towns, and see what happens. I mean, on paper, Tim Connelly was cooking last night, Judd.
So it's a 2030 pick swap, correct? And then a 2031. So we're going into
it's a 2030 unprotected, right? And then a 31
No, it's a
swap.
No, according to what the Strib had, it was a 2030 pick swap and then a 31 unprotected first. But anyway, it's hilariously funny that trade can be had by basically trading what is right now grade school kids who are probably stars in basketball. Yes, this is so. I love this, and here's why. Because there's 2 or 3 things here that are great. One is it's great to have an executive who, right or wrong, knows exactly what he wants. Right. So Tim Connelly doesn't care about what we think. He doesn't care about what the blogosphere thinks. Tim Connelly does what Tim Connelly deems to be best, which is why Tim Connelly makes a ton of money and why I believe he's well worth that investment. I love how he operates because, again, you don't have the feeling that Tim Connelly sits in a room with 15 people and runs his ideas past them and then gets wishy-washy, right? He feels like a very decisive dude, which is why I don't think he can just be replaced. Well, if he leaves, Sashan can come back and Gupta can come back in. Okay, that might be the case, but I really like how he operates. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. The second thing that I absolutely love is there is clearly I should be clear here. I think Conley and Finch work well together. So I am not saying that they don't. I think that they work very well. I think Conley goes grocery shopping and Finch is the chef and he makes a good meal. But I loved Conley's post-draft press conference last night where he said, where it was, I think, implied, I didn't hear the question, but it basically said, hey, so Dillingham, what's the plan there? Because we all know that in the past, Finchie is not exactly champing at the bit to play young players. And Conley said, oh, no, No. We are getting him to play immediately. That's the plan. And then went into a pretty good explanation of, and you've discussed this before too, the Timberwolves, because of the whole second apron thing, are extremely handcuffed about what they can do. They really can't go out and dip into free agency in a couple of days. They are very, very limited, right? So he said, okay, I'm going to get the best possible guy I can to be a scorer, to complement Ant, and he's going to play. This is not a development project. So I love what we saw last night, and I think it's why you have to appreciate a GM who has a very good idea exactly what he wants and is prepared, I'm sure, to get the praise if he's right, but he's also prepared to get the criticism, but you don't feel like he dips his toe in the water. You feel like he says, you know what? We're in here and the window is open. He realizes that. Think about the times, Phil, that we've complained, not so much the Wolves, but teams in this town, right?
Well, the Twins do it all the time.
Is the window open or is it not? Like, and like they talk about it, but they never really decisively, it's like, to your point, okay, the window is open. We're going to go get Sam Dyson. Oh, okay.
Vikings competitive rebuild. Yes. What is that? That's okay.
Think about what straddling. Connelly basically got up to a podium after making the move and said, the window's open. Here's what we're doing. I love that.
Well, and so a couple things off that. Dillingham himself in his press conference was asked about kind of joining up with this team. And he says it's a 19-year-old kid, a freshman who came off the bench for Kentucky, by the way. Still played like 26 minutes a night, but he was a bench player as a freshman for Kentucky. And he said, yeah, I thought they had a really good team. They're like one piece away. And he's essentially saying, I am the one piece away at 19 years old from winning a championship. But you're talking about the short-term window being open, which it is. They were in the Western Conference Finals. They were favored even going into their matchup against the Mavericks. But it's also a long-term play. So short-term, yeah, you're a scorer or two away from, maybe the defense. It's tough to be the number one defense every single year. Maybe the defense goes from like first in terms of, net rating down to third or fifth or something. But with these two young players, if you can inject them in throughout the season, maybe short-term you go up into the top 10 or top 8 offensively. Anthony Edwards takes a step. So like in the short term, you made your team better on paper. But over the long term, Anthony Edwards is 23 years old, going to turn 23 years old. He's under contract for another half decade into his prime. And you just found him a backcourt running mate for the next half decade. So short term makes your offense better. Long term, is this the Anthony Edwards, Rob Dillingham, Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's 24? Naz Reid, that's the funniest thing when you look back 2 years ago at most of the Rudy Gobert trade takes. We've seen a couple worse trades by a mile since that was made, including maybe even the Mikal Bridges trade that the Knicks just made. I like that for the Knicks, and they've got the Villanova guys all together. But the Wolves got instantly better. They go to the Western Conference Finals, but people, well, what are they going to do? They're all in. They gave up all their draft picks. Well, no, they gave up every other year's worth of draft picks. They still had first-round picks every other year, including this year. And if you look at their roster, they have like 10 or 11 guys, 25 or younger. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, think about, like, let's say Rudy Gobert ages out, Cat, gets into his 30s. Right. You're still looking at Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., Nickeil Alexander-Walker, all these young dudes. Yeah. And they might, Leonard Miller might emerge at some point. So this was, again, these guys have to pan out. Dillingham has to become the player that people think he can be. And Terrence Shannon Jr. was one of the best pure scorers in college basketball. He's actually the 6th oldest Timberwolf right now on the roster. Terrence Shannon Jr., he's 23 years old. He's older than Ant. He's older than all of the young players that are sort of, two-way contracts. So here, by the way, here's what people are saying about Dillingham. You already brought up some of the Tim Connelly stuff, but I'll give you another quote from Connelly. We have a lot of good things, the success in the playoffs, the regular season, but we lacked probably a guy besides Anthony Edwards where it's like, okay, just go get a bucket. How do you go get that player? Well, free agency. We had limited options in free agency. Trades, the guys that have value across the league, we don't want to trade them. Basically saying, we don't want to trade Cat. We don't want to trade Gobert. We don't want to trade Jaden or Naz Reid. So you try to get creative, Connelly said. We thought Dillingham was the best shot creator in the entire draft. So he was a focus. I don't know how we can achieve getting a player like that in the next 2 or 3 years via free agency. We don't want to trade our core guys. It's pretty simplistic. I think we've checked a major box that we lacked last year. And then I'll give you one from Missouri coach Dennis Gates from conference play. So Mizzou played Kentucky and got beat. It was a game in which Dillingham had 25 points or whatever on he had 25 points on 8 shots or something, a bunch of threes and free throws. Mm-hmm. What I see is this, Dennis Gates said. I see some great one-on-one players on Kentucky who can make shots, and you start with Rob Dillingham. He's probably the best isolation player in all of college basketball. That's what I believe. And then Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, not to be confused with Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell. He did the full draft board scouting reports for everybody. And he called Rob Dillingham an electric bucket getter who's starting to develop as a playmaker as well. And then on Twitter called it a haul that the Wolves could get Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. in the same first round on the same night. So rave reviews across the board, whether it's Tim Connelly or it's coaches in the conference that he played in, or it's media guys like KOC. A lot of people saying the Wolves may have won the night last night.
I think it's, as Tim Connelly explained too, it was clearly because of what they're up against with the second apron and all the taxes and financially, it was clearly the only way that they were going to add anything that they saw as a chance to get the type of score and the type of player that we all know that they lacked in the Western Conference Finals. So yeah, this is I love the decisiveness. I love the recognition, and I mean, let's talk about the fact that Doogie's guy, Bobby Marks, who's a salary cap expert, tweeted last night that the Wolves' luxury tax bill increases from $56 million to $84 million with the Dillingham selection. Yeah. So they are positively all in. And I mean, right now that's on Glenn. So Glenn Taylor is clearly okaying this.
He is.
And so, yeah, the future is certainly looking pretty darn solid with the amount of young core players that you're going to have. But just as importantly, I think, is that they are clearly going all in again. And I'm pretty convinced that Connelly is telling the truth, unlike Cat. I think he is. I don't think they're going to trade Cat.
I don't either.
Now, can Connelly pull a surprise? Yes, with the best of them. So I'm not going to say it's 100% guaranteed Cat is back, because the Gobert thing was an absolute shocker. That being said, though, I mean, I believe that the Wolves are going to open next season way over the second apron. And I believe that they are going in with their eyes on, hey, look, the Western Conference Finals were fun. We're really good. And we think that we have a shot. And I will go back to what I said before. This is not a town, we've seen this before. I don't want to say that we have not seen a team go all in this town before. It's happened, but basketball wise, it's new. And I love the cohesiveness of, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. And we are going to find a way, at least in our mind, through the draft, to improve. And now, again, I also think that I think Connelly's comments also, though, were a very clear indication of, hey, Finchy, listen up. Dillingham's playing.
Yeah. I do wonder. I'm sure they had those discussions, right? Because I'm sure, and man, there's so much. You just opened up so many potential avenues here. Let's put a pin in the Cat thing for a second, because I think what happened last night is the best case scenario on paper. Again, these players have to pan out, but for the team and for Cat. But we'll come back to the Cat thing. But we reference second apron a lot on this show, and I think I sense that over the last 2 or 3 months, there's a lot of maybe casual fans that have gone back all in on the Timberwolves. Maybe you're consuming podcasts about the Timberwolves. Welcome to Flagrant Howls for the first time. Or maybe you weren't even a basketball fan. Maybe you're a Purple Daily listener or something, and now here you are listening to Wolves podcast, like, what did you guys talk about the second apron? So Connelly laid it out, and we read some of it in that quote, but this is what the Wolves are up against. So first of all, there's the salary cap, and unlike the NFL where it's a hard cap, you can't go over the NFL salary cap. In the NBA, you can go over the salary cap, re-signing your own guys. You know, there's things called bird rights where if you have an internal player that's been around long enough, you can re-sign him up and over the salary cap. It allows teams to keep their own players. Mm-hmm. But above the salary cap, in order to provide some penalty for going up the ladder, there's the luxury tax, and then there's the first apron, and now there's the second apron starting this year. And so the Wolves have not very often been a luxury tax or a first apron team. And so this is sort of unprecedented. Right? Yeah. Because they're not good enough usually to be, right? But now they are. Now they're one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the NBA. So they're one of a small handful of teams they're one of the most expensive teams in the league. And what the NBA is trying to do is they're trying to prevent these super teams from forming. They want more parity. They want more competition. And they're kind of getting that with, we haven't seen a back-to-back champion in 6 years or whatever it's been. But here are the second apron restrictions that the Wolves face this summer. They can't use the mid-level exception. Well, first of all, you can't sign a free agent, period, above a veteran minimum because you're over the salary cap. So what they give teams that are over the salary cap into the luxury tax are a mid-level exception. So for the non-luxury tax teams, if you're over the cap but you're below the luxury tax, you get $13 million to go spend on a free agent, which that can get you a good rotation player. If you're in the luxury tax, the luxury tax or first apron, you get a $5 million taxpayer mid-level exception to go get a free agent. Yeah. If you're the Wolves and you're in the second apron, you don't get access to this sort of cheat code free agency money. You also can't combine salaries in a trade. So let's say you decided, boy, we can keep Cat, we can keep Ant and Gobert. We could package like Nikhil and Jaden or something to go get whatever, like DeJounte, whatever the trade would be. When you're in the second apron, you're not allowed to take player A and player B to go get Kevin Durant. And then the other thing is you can't acquire players in sign and trade deals in the offseason if the incoming salary keeps you above the apron. So, so that's look at Paul George might do a sign and trade. LeBron James could, I think he's going back to the Lakers, but he could do a sign and trade. Right. The Wolves would be unable to do a sign and trade if the incoming salary keeps them above the apron. So go back to Tim Connelly's quotes. We're trying to get better. We're trying to add more offense. Yep. Well, trading Cat for maybe just a more microwave scorer, but Cat averages 23, 24 points a game, and he shoots 40% from downtown. So can you get someone in here, and maybe like Boston with Porzingis, or those Heat teams with Bosch, or those Cavs teams with Love, can you get someone else in here to be Ant's riding mate, right, and minimize how much you need Karl on a night-to-night basis to do things that he's not fully great at or comfortable with? Can he be like the third guy now, and he's a unicorn third guy? Mm-hmm. To me, that's the path to a championship for this team. I don't know that 19-year-old Dillingham is going to be that guy right away in his rookie season, but you're dealing with a window here. It's not just short term. This could be a 3-5 year thing as it builds with Ant and Dillingham.
Yeah, and the thing too is the great, I guess it could be called somewhat of a luxury with Dillingham at 19 is you've still got Mike Conley, who is the ultimate father figure in a locker room. So as Dillingham learns, and I'm sure at times struggles, what better a fallback than Conley there to help him? Yeah. Like you could see what the thing I like about this is you could see what the construction process is. To go back to the cliche now, the process of this entire thing makes sense. Like we have no idea. These two kids could be a bust. Who knows, right? But the reality is all you can do is do a process that makes sense, that has logic, that doesn't have a force-fed, oh my God, we can win a championship, let's just go do something, right? Yeah. And with all of the restrictions, which are absolutely crazy, this to me is, if nothing else, Dillingham can come in, he's going to play, probably have an impact, but he's also going to have Mike Conley there to help him out as well. And Conley has proven, I mean, I think that guy could go from the court to a head coach very quickly if that's what Mike Conley wants. So
maybe he'll go start a podcast with Anthony Edwards for 6 months and then come back and
but
be
they
an
don't
NBA
talk.
coach.
But they never talk about the coaching aspect here.
Yeah.
That's the great thing. I never talked to LeBron about coaching. I don't even know. He wanted me to coach.
We spoke in code about it on the podcast for 6 months, but we didn't actually say it out loud.
But Mike Conley is going to be huge here too in the developmental role of these kids. So I think what we saw last night was two things. One, it was the best shot that the Wolves possibly had to improve, clearly. And two, it was an example that going into the second apron is noble. Like what the Wolves are doing, they're not trying to tear things down based on finances, but it is clearly punitive as hell.
It is. Yeah, it's hard. You have to make a decision as a franchise. Is it worth keeping the band together but losing the mobility to make certain additions to your team? And the Wolves threaded the needle brilliantly because, again, in the second apron, you can't get a $5 million player in free agency. But they just found, I haven't looked at the slotting, but they just found like a $5 or $7 or $8 million player with the 8th overall pick that's 19 years old.
Yeah. That
they wouldn't have been able to add that cash in a free agent signing. Exactly. But they did via maneuvering brilliantly in the draft. And we haven't even barely talked about Terrence Shannon Jr., Terrence Shannon Jr. In about a third of his games scored 28 points or more. We saw him torch the Gophers at least once this year. I think I was at the game because I went to the Big Ten tournament was here this year, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was that this year? Yeah.
And they won it.
Yeah. So I was at the Nebraska-Illinois game where he dropped 40 points. Like he just literally scored from wherever he wanted to.
Yep.
And he comes in 23 years old. Like he's by the way, he's lankier. He's 6'5", 6'6", can play some defense. Mm-hmm. So he probably comes in, probably projects more as like a, 6th, 7th man off the bench. Dillingham probably starts coming off the bench, but long-term projects as your starting point guard. Tim Connelly clarified, by the way, he's a 1. Is he a combo guard? Is he a shooting guard? And Connelly said he's a 1 who gets buckets.
Yes.
Yeah. Couple more things for you here, including let's go through what the current rotation looks like and a recent history of Kentucky guards, which is going to make people very excited. But EcoFun is here as your summertime fun headquarters. 2 locations, one in Forest Lake and then one in Burnsville. As you see on the YouTube channel, just a warehouse full of scooters, motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, electric bikes. And then on the waterfront, we're talking 2024 Kawasaki and Yamaha, all sorts of fun things for you to hop on for these summer months. Find out more at ecofunmotorsports.com. Or like I said, go into the Forest Lake location, which also has the watercraft in addition to the pavement toys, and Burnsville, and tell them that Flagrant Howls and or Score North sent you in. So just for fun last night, I was going through the list of recently drafted, by recently I mean like in the last 10 years, recently drafted Kentucky guards. And not all of them are hits, but this list is crazy. Tyrese Maxey, Tyler Hero, who's probably the worst on this list.
Yeah.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, De'Aaron Fox, Jamal Murray, who was drafted by Tim Connelly in Denver, Devin Booker in the last 10 years. Just these 6'2", 6'4", ball handling combo guards. Man, if he nailed another Jamal Murray or another Tyrese Maxey here, well, good night Western Conference if you pair him up with Anthony Edwards for the next 8 to 10 years.
And that's why you pay the man his money. Like this is, I cannot convey enough how important I think it is to have a GM like this. Who knows? I mean, his history is good, and like you see him operate. And I know the Gobert trade at the time was weird, but you see him operate with a decisiveness. Like this is why you pay a guy a ridiculous amount. And I think if we were ranking salaries on this team, Tim Connelly's factors in, and it's crucial. One, it doesn't count against the taxes, right?
No.
Two, yeah, it's a lot for an executive, but if you look at what he brings in talent-wise,
Yeah.
it's sort of a bargain.
What's he making now? 8. He's making 8 right now.
Yeah.
Because and then they just like told his option for another year.
Yes.
So he would be. I should bring the Wolves cap table.
He's a cheap player.
Yeah, he makes more than Nikhil.
Yeah.
But would you rather have? Would you for the next 5 to 10 years? You have to pick Tim Connelly or Jaden McDaniels.
Oh, I'll take Connelly because I think he can find another Jaden if he has to.
You probably take Anthony Edwards over a front office guy for sure because it's hard to find those superstars.
Oh yeah. But I'm saying too, look at the salary. Like we think, oh my God, for an executive, for a GM, that's a ton, a president, a Pobo. But the reality is, and Wolves fans can attest to this more than anybody. We've seen a lot of Pobos. We've seen a lot of executives not get anywhere, this creative or screw the pooch entirely. Mm-hmm. And then you see last night, and I mean, did any of us on our bingo card have the Wolves trading for the 8th pick?
No,
I was 10 pick.
Dude, I was sitting on the couch, hanging out with my wife. We're just we've got the draft on, volume up, but it's kind of soft. And we're both scrolling through. Now I'm scrolling through like a little smooth jazz in the background.
Smooth jazz draft.
Yeah, it's great. Hanging out with our dog, Maya. And I'm scrolling through NBA Twitter, and then we're like, of course, you sit on the couch with your wife and you send like memes back and forth, whatever. And all of a sudden, faintly in the background, I hear, I think it was Malika Andrews or whoever was on TV at the time, and she casually cuts in, the Timberwolves have traded up with the Spurs for the draft rights to Dillingham, and then they go back into whatever kind. And I was like, I literally had to rewind it on YouTube TV. Like, wait a second, this wasn't. I thought there was a chance they might just like not make a first round pick, that maybe they would trade it and package something, to get an established player. But
I agree.
So we should, real quick before we wrap this, we should just take a glance at the current rotation. Mm-hmm. So again, with all the restrictions we talked about, there is a chance they're not looking to go much deeper into the luxury tax abyss here. So even without Kyle Anderson on the team, because he's a free agent, Monte Morris is a free agent, Jordan McLaughlin, they're in the second apron. So do they want to keep going deeper, paying more? So there is a pretty good chance, unless Kyle Anderson wants to play for like league minimum or close, Monte Morris, he might even be close to a league minimum guy just coming off like the whatever leg injury he had. But let's take those guys off the team right now. Kyle Anderson, Monte Morris, Jordan McLaughlin's not coming back. So your starters right now are Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley for now. And then your main bench rotation players are Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I'm going to put Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. in your immediate rotation. I mean, Connelly said Dillingham's playing. And Terrence Shannon Jr. is the 6th oldest player on the team. He's 23, so he's probably going to play.
Close to retirement at this point.
All right. He's probably not going to get a second contract.
Hang it up
too
soon.
old. Too old. So that's 9, and you're looking for at least another 1 or 2 that can contribute in the regular season and see what it looks like. So the next bin would be the Leonard Miller, Josh Minott, Luka Garza is a restricted free agent, and then Jalen Clark is the UCLA guard that they took a year ago coming off the Achilles injury. He was the defensive player of the year in college basketball. So that'll be interesting. But it kind of feels like, I don't know that you can just say, all right, we've got 7 established players, and then Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Leonard Miller, we're going to trust you guys. I almost feel like you need at least one more veteran minimum guy, like a wing player, someone. I don't know if anyone's done a list of the likely veteran minimum guys, but you probably need at least one more established veteran on this bench.
Which of the second group of guys, the young guys, in your opinion, has the biggest ability to surprise? Like if one of those guys in the second group is going to make an impact and we don't necessarily see it coming, who is it?
I think Leonard Miller. He's big. He can shoot. he's definitely still raw, and defensively he's going to. You go from Kyle Anderson being a really versatile and high IQ overall player and defender, a big body. Leonard Miller's not, in some ways. Leonard Miller is a more explosive offensive player than Kyle Anderson, but in terms of like basketball IQ, veteran savviness, defense, floor general, all those things. It'll be interesting to see how he would replace that Kyle Anderson slot. But I think I didn't mention Wendell Moore, but I would probably put him behind all these guys. Just like the offense hasn't really come around, even the G League. But I would say Leonard Miller. But even with Leonard Miller, I would feel more comfortable if they found at least one more veteran minimum guy, or if there was, could you package a couple young guys together and get somebody that could give you 15, 20 minutes? But when you count the 7 guys that were in the rotation last year and then the offensive potential of Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr., I love where this thing's going. And by the way, like the peak version of Leonard Miller is like a diet Chris Bosh. You know, those were the comparisons he was drawing last year draft time. So how quickly can these guys get up to speed? And the thing about like Rob Dillingham, he's going to have to deal with, he's not a big guy, man. He's like 6'1" without shoes and 160 pounds or something.
He's really light. Yes.
And now he's going to be dealing with NBA bodies and the paint and trees. So can he navigate
down
that?
Too. That's a long schedule.
Yep. But he's not going to have to shoulder, like Ja Morant has to shoulder all of it from Memphis. Dillingham doesn't, man. Come in here. You're going to have 4 great defenders around you at any given time. You're going to have guys to pass to. He was saying, I actually think it's going to be easier in the NBA because there's more space. Everything is more spaced out, and NBA shooters are pulling bodies away. You know,
Ask him in March.
I'm going to get around my defender.
Ask him in March when they're like back to back and going to play the Spurs or Portland. You might not say that then.
Yeah. So, yeah, let us know what you think of the first round of the draft for the Wolves in the Score North YouTube channel comment section. You can hit us up on Twitter or X. He's Jay Zulgad. I'm at Phil Mackey. Our guy Kyle Tigey is going to be back in the mix here. Where Kyle was taking he's got a lot of things going on. Got a new home. So we said, Kyle, take some summertime off from Flagrant Howls, but he'll be back in the mix here in the next week or two. So we're pumped to get him back on board. But yeah, let us know what you think of Tim Connelly cooking last night. Any final thoughts from you?
You talk about cooking. You know, the phrase at the draft, let Kwesi cook. I mean, he was, you know, he was cooking, but last night was real. When you get a top 10 pick and you're picking 27, and by the way, you don't give up that pick, that, my friend, is standing over a hot stove and cooking.
Yeah. I don't know what the Spurs were thinking. They must just hate this draft. This is not a very heralded draft.
I was going to say, I think the Wolves probably had, but the Wolves the draft just quickly is weird here because like the Wolves had a very express purpose. Like, I think if you're the Spurs, because we think a draft says you're going to add all this talent for the future, right? Like Connelly, I think, identified a player and said, that guy can help us immediately. I think the Spurs are still a little ways away. So I think your philosophy in the NBA because of that is different.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah. They got Wemby, so they're trying to put pieces around Wemby. Now, when the initial draft pick was made, people were like, oh, Dillingham and Wemby, this is going to be great. That's the thing about the draft. You never know what's going to happen. So these guys put the hat on and they go do the interview.
I don't understand. I know it's logistics and stuff. I hate this.
Dude, and then at one point there was a Wizards pick that had been sent to the Knicks, but then the Knicks had routed it to the Thunder. And Bob Myers and Stephen A. Smith on the alternate broadcast were breaking down this player going to the Knicks. And then right after they got done, it was like, oh, wait, no, he's going to Oklahoma City. Why?
It's the second best run league. It is the worst draft.
Yeah, just let them trade the players on draft night, just like NFL teams. It's like
you got to sign. It's like you agree to terms and wait like 6 days too.
Yeah, fix it.
When the
Adam
free agency
Silver.
period starts, just silliness.
Fix it. But the Wolves have some interesting pieces here. Reasons to be excited. Summer League's going to be a blast. This is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.